TED Talks, brought to you by Erbs and Gerbs. Go online and check out their delightful sandwich menus and soups. Order yourself something today.
Ted Swetzler at TL Swears from Twins Daily for another TED Talks. Twins, it was a rough end of the week for the Twins. Going into the Guardian series, a win the first game, really should have won all three, but definitely should have won the third game. Force extra innings after being up 2-0 late. Rocco Baldelli gets blasted again for pulling Sonny Gray, who pitched 7 innings and turned the ball over to the bullpen. Griffin Jacks comes and gives up a run, and Joan Duran, who has been relatively awful since the All-Star break, just could not shut down the game. Ugly outing. Gives up the lead. Twins lose it in extras. It just was not pretty. With the off day on Thursday, the big storyline was waiver claims, and the Angels really turned things on their head when they decided to wave the white flag after making moves at the trade deadline, acquiring Giolito. They had Matt Moore from earlier in the season. They acquired Ronaldo Lopez. They had Hunter Renfroe. They acquired Randall Grichuk. They put all of them on waivers, and the Twins had a decent position to grab some of those players. Unfortunately, Minnesota and Derek Falvey, the front office, decided to do nothing at the trade deadline. I reported on Thursday that Minnesota had made at least 3 waiver claims. Sounds like they had made 4. But they were not in a position to grab all of those players if teams ahead of them decided to make moves. And unfortunately, Cleveland, after winning 2 of 3 against Minnesota, put in a bunch of waiver claims. Minnesota didn't need a ton of help, but the relievers, Matt Moore, Ronaldo Lopez, made sense. Potentially Hunter Renfroe, maybe even Harrison Bader from the Yankees made sense to add. But Cleveland, Cincinnati grabbed most of those players, which is interesting too, given their hesitancy to spend money. Cleveland parted pieces out at the trade deadline. Cincinnati really never spends, but both of those teams added players on the waiver deadline. Both those teams would have those players eligible for the playoffs should they make it. Cleveland adds more Lopez and Giolito. Minnesota and Cleveland now have 28 games left. Minnesota has a 5-game lead. They need to make sure that holds up. And Cleveland, making up that 5-game lead is not, or 5-game deficit is not going to be easy. They have a much more difficult schedule than the Twins do. However, they added a significant amount of talent on Thursday, and Minnesota will now have to traverse a week that includes Texas and Cleveland. With a 5-game lead, things could be very interesting by this point next week. Minnesota, if they play a 500 schedule the rest of the way, Cleveland would need to win about 19 games out of their final 28. It's an uphill battle. That's why Fangraphs has Cleveland at just over a 5% chance for the postseason. But Minnesota has allowed the Guardians to make things way more interesting than it should be. By this time next week, there should be a good indication of what the AL Central looks like. And if Minnesota is scraping by for things, it would be a pretty big indictment on the front office. So hopefully Rocco Baldelli and his Twins can go down to Texas and at least split in Cleveland, maybe get a series win here or there. But it's an ugly look right now for the Twins, and they have a lot to do internally. So how they traverse September, especially getting back, hopefully, Byron Buxton, Alex Kirilloff, Willie Castro. Talent like that, there's just no reason for them to squander this division, but if things happen over the next week, we could have an interesting final 2-3 weeks. Check back in next week.